You know, there are some places on Earth whose stories are so huge, so monumental, they sound like they're straight out of science fiction. Today, we're going to talk about one of them, an ancient university that literally changed the course of history. We're going to Nalanda. So let's just dive right in. I want you to picture this. We think of places like Harvard or Oxford as the peak of academic challenge, right? Well, what if I told you that back in the 5th century, an institution in India had an admissions process so brutal it made today's top schools look easy? We're talking about a place built on a standard of genius that's almost hard to comprehend. So you have to be asking, how in the world did a place like this even come to exist? To really get it, we need to go back in time, way back, to a period known as India's Golden Age, a time of just incredible discovery and wealth. This is the story of how Nalanda became the intellectual heartbeat of Asia for nearly 800 years. And get this, even its name was a kind of epic promise. Nalanda. In the ancient language of Sanskrit, it's Na Alam Da, and that translates to something like an inexhaustible spring of wisdom, a place where the gift of knowledge would never, ever stop. That wasn't just a name, it was the whole mission. Okay, so the year is 427 CE. The university is officially founded by an emperor named Kumaragupta I. And here's what's so fascinating. He was a follower of the Hindu tradition, but he poured his support into this Buddhist center of learning. It just shows you what an open-minded and intellectually curious time this was, a real age of enlightenment. But, a grand vision is one thing. How did Nalanda actually work day to day? How did it support thousands of people and keep its insane standards up for centuries? Well, the answer is in this brilliant, self-sustaining system that, frankly, modern universities could still learn a thing or two from. First, let's just try to wrap our heads around the sheer scale here. This was not some small, quiet monastery. Nope. At its peak, Nalanda was a buzzing, sprawling city of ideas. It was home to 10,000 students. And they weren't just locals. They were the best and brightest from all over Asia, Tibet, China, Korea, as far away as Indonesia. It was a truly global university. And guiding those 10,000 students, 2,000 teachers and staff members. Now, do the math. That's a 5-to-1 student-to-teacher ratio. That's an incredible amount of personal attention and intense one-on-one debate. A level of engagement that's almost unheard of, even now. So the big question is, who paid for all this? Well, the economic model was honestly revolutionary. Royal patrons gave Nalanda the income from about 200 nearby villages. This meant that for the students and teachers, everything, and I mean everything, from their classes to their food to their housing, was completely free. This freed up their minds to focus on only one thing, the pursuit of truth. But here's the catch. You couldn't just, sign up. To get into this intellectual paradise, you first had to face the Dwarapanditas, the gatekeeper scholars. And these weren't just security guards. They were some of the most brilliant scholars at the entire university, whose only job was to protect its high standards right at the front gate. And the entrance exam, it wasn't a written test. It was an intense, face-to-face intellectual battle. The gatekeeper scholar would grill you with these incredibly deep questions about logic and philosophy. If you couldn't keep up, if you couldn't prove your intellectual firepower, you were politely turned away. The failure rate was somewhere around 70 or 80%. Only the absolute best got in. So let's say you're one of the lucky few who made it past the gate. What did you get to study? Well, let's go inside, to the academic heart of Nalanda, to its legendary curriculum and a library so magnificent it was famous across the continent. Now, you might think, okay, a Buddhist university, so they only studied Buddhism, right? Absolutely not. While it was a Buddhist center, the curriculum was incredibly diverse. Students weren't just chanting. They were getting this rigorous training in logic, in medicine, grammar, fine arts, and especially mathematics, studying the work of geniuses like Aryabhata, who might have even been the head of the university at one point. And at the very core of this whole world of knowledge was its library. It had this beautiful name, the Dharmaganja, which means the treasury of truth. And it wasn't just a place where they kept books. It was the intellectual engine for pretty much all of Asia. And when I say library, don't picture just one building. The Dharmaganja was a massive complex made of 3 huge structures, and each had a name that sounds like something out of a fantasy novel. You had the Ratnasagara, the ocean of jewels. the Ratnaranjaka, the jewel-adorned, and the most famous one, Ratnodadhi, the Sea of Jewels. This Sea of Jewels building was said to be a staggering 9 stories high. We actually have an eyewitness account from a Chinese scholar named Xuanzang who studied there. He wrote that when the morning sun hit the top of that library, the whole campus would just glow. I mean, can you imagine that sight? A skyscraper full of books, shining like a beacon of knowledge. For almost 800 years, that beacon of knowledge shone brightly. But as we all know, nothing lasts forever. And the story of Nalanda's end is it's a gut-wrenching story of misunderstanding, violence, and one of the greatest intellectual tragedies in the history of the world. But here's what's so important to understand. This place was tough. The final, terrible destruction wasn't the first time Nalanda had been in danger. It was attacked way back in the 5th century, and then again in the 7th. And each time, it was badly damaged, but its supporters and its scholars rebuilt it. It was incredibly resilient. But the third time, that would be the last. So, around the year 1193, a Turkic general named Bakhtiar Khalji was leading an invasion in the area. And according to a Persian historian from that time, Khalji's forces saw Nalanda's high red brick walls and its thousands of residents with shaved heads, and they made a catastrophic mistake. They thought it was a military fort. They stormed the fortress, killing the monks who had no way to defend themselves. And then, they set fire to the Dharmaganja, the treasury of truth. Historical accounts tell us that the library, holding an estimated 9 million books and manuscripts, was so enormous that it burned for 3 continuous months. The smoke was said to hang over the hills like a black cloud, a funeral pyre for centuries of human wisdom. And you'd think, okay, that's it, story's over, a total, heartbreaking loss. But the core idea of Nalanda, that no stopping in the gift of knowledge, well, that turned out to be stronger than brick and flame. Its legacy found a way to survive, in exile. This next part is just incredible. 40 years after that apocalyptic fire, a Tibetan monk travels to the site. And what does he find there in the middle of all that rubble and ash? He finds a 90-year-old man, a scholar named Rahula Sribhadra, Nalanda's last great teacher, still holding classes for 70 students. It just goes to show you, even when the buildings fall, the human drive to teach and learn, that never truly dies. And the knowledge itself, it wasn't completely wiped out. For centuries, scholars had been carrying these little seeds of knowledge, the manuscripts they painstakingly copied, back home with them, over the mountains to Tibet and China. And those surviving texts, safe in other lands, became the foundation for new traditions of learning, preserving the science and logic of Nalanda for the future. You can actually visit the ruins of Nalanda today, but its true legacy isn't in those silent red bricks. It's in the very idea of a university as we know it, a residential international campus dedicated to a wide range of subjects and the free pursuit of ideas. The blueprint that Nalanda created 1,500 years ago is the one we're still using all over the world. And that leaves us with one last kind of haunting question to think about. Just try to imagine all that knowledge that went up in smoke. Medical texts, astronomical charts, new forms of mathematics, deep philosophy. If you could somehow reach into that fire and save the books from just one of those fields, which would you pick? What do you think was humanity's greatest loss in those flames?